The fog of dawn hung over a silent lake, its edges concealing distant shores. On the water's edge, dark wooden huts contrasted with luminous flowers growing in bunches on the twisted branches of the trees. Julia adjusted her cloak against the damp chill, her feet sinking into the mud as she followed a narrow path. The only sounds were the crunch of her boots and the distant croaking of a night bird refusing to sleep. Among the trees, faint lights flickered in windows draped with thick curtains, suggesting lives that preferred to remain unseen. She stopped, hearing a metallic clatter coming from one of the huts, but there was no one in sight. The door creaked gently, as if pushed from within. Further on, she found a researcher's notebook, pages scattered across the damp ground. The diagrams showed disconnected weather patterns, dates that didn't match official records. Julia tucked the papers into her backpack, determined to deliver them to Dr. Indigo, a climatologist who had been warning about anomalies in the region for months. Arriving at the makeshift lab in central Madrid, she found her colleagues in a flurry. Recent reports indicated that the average temperature had risen sharply in 12 hours, melting snow on distant peaks. But Dr. Indigo was not there. On his desk, only a scrawled note, "They don't want to understand. The stone chamber is alive." That night, Julia followed the coordinates written on the back of the note. The path led her to a hidden clearing nestled between volcanic rocks, where an ancient stone well exhaled colorful vapors that danced under the moonlight. Worn runes encircled its edge, and the air carried a low hum, almost imperceptible. As she approached, she felt a pressure on her chest, as if the silence there was made of something tangible. Fragments of conversations echoed in her mind, voices that weren't voices, discussing numbers and probabilities. She recoiled, but it was too late. The colors of the vapors intensified, forming figures resembling maps of submerged lands. Back in the city, Julia noticed subtle changes. People whispered about storms that erupted from nowhere, tearing off roofs and leaving cracks in old buildings. A farmer claimed to have seen crops bloom and wither in a matter of hours. The phenomenon was dubbed Horizon on social media, a mix of conspiracy theories and desperate accounts. The government issued generic statements, while the media interviewed supposed experts. Julia, however, knew the answer lay at the source of the vapors. Days later, she found Indigo in a secluded cafe. He looked older, his eyes hollow, fixed on a tablet. "It's not just the temperatures," he said, scrolling through graphs on the screen. "Time is misaligned. Lost hours, overlapping memories. And someone is trying to control it." Before he could explain, another alarm blared on the device. A hailstorm was forming to the west, though the sky was clear. They rushed to their car, but the road was blocked by fallen trees, their roots exposed like ruptured veins. As Julia navigated alternative routes, Indigo murmured about an abandoned 1980s project, when geologists drilled the region in search of geothermal energy. They found something. Some disappeared. Others swore they saw things. The storm caught up with them suddenly. The hail turned into acid rain that corroded the car's body. They sought shelter in an abandoned train station, where graffiti on the walls replicated the same inscriptions from the well. Indigo touched the drawings, his voice trembling. "This isn't human. Or is it? But in a way we don't understand." At dawn, the rain stopped, leaving a metallic smell in the air. Julia realized her watch read midnight, though the sun was already high. Indigo had vanished, leaving only his jacket and a fragment of volcanic rock. In his pocket, a slip of paper with a single sentence. "The horizon is not a place. It's a warning." She returned to the lake, now shrouded in a dense fog that swallowed sound and light. In the distance, she saw figures walking in circles, as if searching for something that had never been there. The wind carried a smell of ozone and burnt earth as Julia reached the Natural History Museum, its doors locked for weeks. Through a broken window, she saw overturned display cases and ancient maps scattered on the floor. One, dated from the 19th century, depicted the lake region as a delta of dry rivers, with Latin annotations about vapor portals. As she collected the papers, a voice echoed from the hallway. "You felt it too, didn't you?" It was Dr. Valeria, Indigo's ecologist, her face marked by recent scratches. "The witnesses are disappearing," she said, handing Julia a flash drive. "Satellite data shows the horizon is not random. It's a response." Before she could explain, Another explosion rocked the building. They raced to the basement, where a secret room contained monitors connected to sensors buried near the vapor chamber. The images showed human figures entering the fog, but their movements seemed disjointed, as if being rewritten. Valeria adjusted the parameters of a program. Unstable chromotypes. Someone is trying to synchronize past and future events. An alert flashed on the screen. Negative temperature recorded in the Tabernas Desert, followed by a prehistoric lichen bloom. That night, Julia dreamt of the well. This time, the vapors formed familiar faces. Indigo, Valeria, even herself, all whispering equations in dead languages. She awoke with her hand on a hidden diary in her backpack that wasn't hers. The pages detailed experiments with volcanic crystals, signed by a certain Dr. Corvo, missing since 1987. The last entry was a question: what if the climate isn't the problem, but the solution? At dawn, a group of protesters gathered in the Plaza Mayor, demanding answers about the phantom days, periods when entire hours disappeared from clocks. Julia noticed a man in a gray suit observing from a distance, his phone emitting a bluish glow identical to the vapors from the chamber. She followed him to an underground parking garage, where he spoke with a government official. "We can't contain the leak," the man said, his voice strained. "The anomaly is spreading faster than predicted." Back at the lake, Julia found Valeria unconscious near the path, her hand clutching a luminous vein-streaked rock fragment. The power cables from nearby huts were melted, and the residents had departed, leaving furniture covered in white sheets. Beside the chamber, Julia placed Corvo's crystals on the runes. For a moment, the vapors ceased, revealing an underground passage with walls covered in symbols pulsing in sync with heartbeats. In the center, an obsidian sphere reflected scenes of storms in deserts, glaciers erupting, oceans ablaze. When Valeria awoke hours later, Julia had already left. In her place, she left a map marked with locations where clocks stopped working, plus an old photo of Dr. Corvo alongside Indigo, both smiling in front of the same source. On the image's margin, a note read, "Not all mistakes are accidents." As night fell, Valeria turned on her computer and typed a word into the search bar: Horizon. The results included a 1943 scientific article on climatic wormholes and a recent drone video showing humanoid shadows walking on the lake water. Meanwhile, Julia was in an abandoned train station, facing a train that didn't appear on any official schedule. Its carriages were filled with sleeping people, their faces illuminated by an amber light emanating from the windows. A faded uniformed man handed her a note with the date crossed out. "It only departs when you decide," he said, before vanishing. She entered the last carriage, where a 2124 newspaper headline read, "Earth enters an era of climatic equilibrium after a pact with the horizon." Before she could read further, the train began to move, and the lights went out, leaving only the familiar hum of the chamber in her ears. The train moved silently on invisible tracks. The windows revealed landscapes oscillating between ice deserts and crystal forests. Julia walked to the conductor's cabin, but found only an empty room with a monitor displaying inverted coordinates. As she touched the screen, data projections emerged. Graphs showed the horizon as a living entity, feeding on climatic contradictions. A Corvo note highlighted, "Equilibrium demands sacrifices. We were the sacrificers. Now we are the offering." As the train stopped abruptly, Julia saw her reflection in a window, but it was a younger version of herself, holding a broken toy. The door opened to an unrecognizable Madrid. Skyscrapers grew like roots to the sky, and rivers flowed in spirals. People wearing animal masks discussed in plazas, while holograms of ancient politicians warned about the era of synchronicity. A street vendor offered an apple that withered and reborn in seconds. "Time isn't linear here," he said, smiling. "It's an ocean. Are you swimming or drowning?" Returning to the carriage, Julia found Indigo seated, his body translucent. "You understand?" he asked, pointing to the obsidian sphere in his hands. "The horizon isn't a threat. It's a correction. Earth is editing humanity." Before she could respond, the train jolted, and Indigo dissolved into particles of light. In his place, a book with blank pages that filled as she turned the pages, accounts of civilizations that negotiated with the climate, agreements written in lichen and blood. In the real world, Valeria was watching a press conference. The government announced the normalization of the horizon, but the background images showed boiling oceans. She called an anonymous number, repeating Corvo's words, "They won't stop until everything is rewritten." From the other end, a robotic voice replied, "Synchronicity has begun. Are you in or out?" Julia, still on the train, reached the last page of the book. A figure emerged from the shadows, the man in the gray suit, now faceless, holding a chronometer counting backward from 0. "You decide the next chapter," he said, handing her a pen made of volcanic stone. As she wrote her name on the page, the train stopped, and the doors opened to the original lake, but the trees were now laden with metallic fruits, and the vapor source exhaled a golden mist. In the distant horizon, a sandstorm formed human silhouettes marching towards the city. Valeria, in an underground lab, connected Corvo's crystals to a makeshift antenna. The air crackled, and for a second, all screens worldwide displayed the same image. A planet breathing, its luminous veins pulsing in rhythm with the chamber's vapors. Julia walked towards the water, where her reflection showed multiple versions of herself at different ages. The pen in her hand melted, forming a ring with symbols identical to those at the source. As she placed it on her finger, she heard voices whispering in unison, "Witness accepted. The pact continues." The fog swallowed everything.